Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. I've had the pleasure to speak with Donna Desrosiers. She's a senior retail advisor, business coach, and executive board facilitator, and she's successfully provided guidance for turnaround, growth, and transformative companies, which have resulted in significant revenue results and has empowered teams to perform at the highest level. She's a growth-minded leader who has never been satisfied with the status quo. Open for new challenges, Donna has accepted executive roles in public, private, corporate, and entrepreneurial sectors such as Quiksilver, Charlotte Russe, and Walmart. With P&L responsibilities ranging from $3 million to over $1 billion, Donna knows firsthand what it's like to make some really tough decisions and at times in a vacuum. As CEO of D&D Enterprise Group, Donna provides fractional services to help retailers, business executives, and various organizations in North America stay ahead of the curve as we, as an entire nation and world, transition to this new reality. Awesome, Donna. Well, thank you for being on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate having a chance to have a conversation.
Absolutely, Donna. So we're in 2020. It's mid 2020, with the whole situation with COVID, and how is this affecting retail? And I want to jump right into this because you've seen retail at a very high level, but you also have seen it with startups and at very ground zero level. So right now, what's the situation you're seeing in the retail world?
Okay, so as far as the retail world goes, that I'm working with quite a few retailers today, and I'm affiliated with a company that has probably about 3,500 retailers in North America in their portfolio. That and other companies that I'm working with, at this point, there's probably, and this is pretty consistent, there's probably about 25% of the retail world that is actually in what I call fight mode.
Hmm.
75% are either kind of freezing or fleeing. Business was what it was before COVID came through. There were weak retailers before that, and then there were retailers that were actually striving. So in the case that you've got a choice to either fight, flight, or freeze is the way I look at it. And if you choose to fight, then you're looking at how you're going to stay ahead of the curve. And what does that mean? So what was, stores are shuttered, but the businesses are not closed. Their customers still want to shop. And so it gives you kind of a choice to say, well, I'm going to sit here and wait. And if you wait, by the time things renew to whatever that's going to look like, it's going to be too late. If you start thinking about how do I think out of the box, I'm brick and mortar. I was thinking about dabbling in e-commerce. What does that look like? And so the creativity and innovation come to play, and people are starting to think like really out of the box. And so they knew they had to go somewhere at some point. But now that everything's shut down, it's now time to think about, well, what can I do differently? So, yeah, so 25% of people are thinking, what are they going to do differently? And these people are the ones that are going to be ahead of the curve when business does resume to whatever that new reality is going to be. They'll be ready, and their customers are going to know that they're there for them.
Absolutely. And I know that I'm not sure the exact percentage, but I do know that there's businesses that maybe they want to do something about it and they're trying to ask those questions, the how. How would you go supporting them or giving them ideas to think differently or answering
Well,
the how? How do I fight back?
Yeah, so the first thing is like think about, your customer. Everybody's at home right now, and how do you keep in touch and how do you stay connected with your customer? That's really the most important point. Your customer and the people that are working with you, your employees, and what does that look like? So you may have had a store, and I'm specifically talking about brick and mortar right now because that's the biggest impact.
Mhm.
How do I bring my store experience? How do I bring my customer service to my customers? And there's things like, first of all, if you're not creative and you don't have that innovative type of mindset,
Mhm.
I highly suggest they would hire somebody, because you can hire some creativity, and people are thinking about, what does that look like? Social media. Moms are sitting at home. If you're talking about ladies apparel or leisure wear, that type of product, then you know how do you do live videos? How do you do social media events? How do you do things that actually they can relate to and hear
Reach the
your
customer.
story? Yeah, and reach the customer in a different way. It doesn't have to be here's the e-commerce website,
Mhm.
but how do you do things? I'll give you an example. One of my clients decided, our stores are closed, but if I have one or two of my associates on the floor, I can reach out to my customers and live, even if it's an iPad. And, so think about what you would never think about doing before, but there's no customers in the store, but you can reach out to some of your key clients and walk the store and show them what you've got and have that
Mhm.
interaction because you know them. And it's that personal touch feeling that you can create in a different way.
Yeah, even as we start to reopen, it's still essential to reach out to customers in the way that not everyone is flooding, the stores to come back as we start to slowly reopen some states. But it's interesting to I think creatively, like you mentioned, but also create leverage within the existing resources that you already have. If you have a staff, how can you create leverage for yourself to reach out to customers or find that time to connect either a live or email or even a messenger or a chat?
Even a handwritten note today, it's not what you do, it's how you make your clients, your customers feel, and your employees. How do you make them feel? That's what they remember.
That's key. That's a huge branding piece there. And I know with business owners, and since this is a new situation that we've never come across, at least me personally as well. But sometimes it feels like we're making decisions, or the decisions are difficult because there's so many different possibilities that we can consider, a lot of variables, and because it might seem that we're siloed out from business to business or from resources or communication based on the current environment. Could you share some experience that you've had when you've had to make really big or difficult decisions? Like, so our audience members know, so Donna's work with P&Ls anywhere ranging from 3 million to $1 billion for large name brands. And you mentioned, Donna, that some of the decisions you had to make seemed like you were in a vacuum. So how did you go through that decision making process?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I come from a world of having people around me, and it's not about one head. It's about two heads are better and three heads.
Mhm.
And so you think about what first. So when you have to do things in a vacuum, it's a little bit different. And I had one experience where we were making major changes in a business that was operating and successful. It was thriving, doing well. And so when you talk about making a strategic change or a change in how we will be doing business, it's difficult because people say, yeah, we get it, but you go first. And why would we change when things are going well?
Mm.
So when you think about, some of the companies that are no longer here or that are falling off, with that mindset, thinking about things are going well, so why change? Well, things do change. And if that mindset doesn't have that thinking about, we're going to do things differently and stay ahead of the curve, I keep coming back to that, you're going to get left behind. So in this one particular case, the business model was a little upside down. And when we talk about today's environment with retail, not just the buying aspect or the design side of it, but the merchandise planning, which is like bottoms up planning, is kind of the left side, right side of the brain. And buyers
Mhm.
used to do both. And this organization didn't have a robust planning group within the midst. And so we well, I was the lead for this, and the strategy was to, over a course of a buying cycle, restructure the headcount of 144 people, not change the number of headcounts, but repurpose to put in a buying group within the portfolio of teams. And so there were decisions that had to be made where, you were looking at, here's the strategy, we're going to be doing this, it makes sense,
Hmm.
and here's the structure of what it looks like, and then the people go in after, versus here are the people I have, how am I going to repurpose them. So to answer that question, we did strategy first. What was the goal? We were putting in merge planning. The structure was going to be to support that, and
Hmm.
then the people behind. We did talent assessing, and we had support in there. But really, it was something that was done under the radar. But while the business was running at 100 miles an hour. And then, you make these decisions, you pull in some lifelines, and you look at things about what's going to be the right part of the business, and then when it's right, so that everything works into the mix in a buying cycle way, so nobody inherited anybody else's
Hmm.
kind of problems or
Yeah.
issues, or that was somebody else. It was clean slate. And on a Friday, after the end of the day, we had envelopes that either offered a position, offered an exit, or offered a new position within the organization. By
Wow.
Monday morning, even the whole space and configuration of the office was changed so that the new teams were in place. So
Wow.
that was that was, if I could say, a vacuum on steroids, because, just to put the human side of it, the last minute before we pulled the trigger on this, I was in home with sticky notes everywhere just for the final, just to make sure this was the right decision and there wasn't anything based on biases about, personal feelings about individuals and stuff. It was what was right for the business. Long story short, it turned out to be successful, and it was rolled out to other divisions. So I'm pretty pleased with
Well, it's incredible, and I want to unpack a lot of one of the things that you've mentioned
that.
there, and I have two questions to follow up. So, I think if I were to simplify a lot of what you just mentioned right there, or to condense it as much as I can, it kind of goes similar to a framework that I use and that I use in the book as well. When I work with clients, it's essentially creating first the framework or the strategy, and then filling that with the tactics that are necessary to execute it and the people necessary. And that, in theory, or as we say here, is sounds simple, but doing it is so much more, because you're actually working with people. You're trying to hit timelines, and you're also meeting the shifting market needs or the changes in the market, which is no easy thing to even just to assess it at first, and then to keep up with it second, right?
Yeah, well, you can't stop the business. The business
Yeah,
is moving 100 miles an hour, and there's performance, and things have to, there's a monthly P&L that comes out, and you've got to
you
make
have to
sure all of
perform.
that is working.
Yeah,
If there's something in a major change, like, and this was the biggest thing that I was fortunate to be able to be charged with this.
hmm,
It was massive undertaking, and as I said, it was successful. Um, but it was one of these things where you think about, if the teams know. I mean, I had a very close nucleus of people that were heading this with me, that
hmm,
knew, but there were over 100 people there, and if there was anything that came through that, we're going to be changing, that's what people are fearful of, that. And you
hmm.
have to be respectful and mindful, because it's a killer. It's, the dopamine is thinking about, am I going to have a job, am I going to do this, how am I going to function. And so we were very mindful to keep the business moving as seamlessly as it was,
Yeah.
and without having disruptions, until we were ready as a group to say, this is what's happening and this is why.
How, and I know there's never perfect, quote unquote, perfect timing, but how did you measure or have a good sense of when the right timing to roll the new change out was?
Yeah, that, in the buying cycle for, and in this, it was everything. It was all apparel. It was every type of product and
Mhm.
every gender. And there are specific, like, cycles in buying and purchasing. And
Mhm.
so we were working towards making sure that we had everything in place for 2 dates. And there were 2 go live or not dates. And the first one came, and I just didn't feel we were 100% buttoned up. You don't have to be 100% because we'd still be going through, what scenarios would be. But it wasn't even close to like the 80% of I'm comfortable, this is ready.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple of critical pieces that we didn't have answers for. And so that date came and went. But then the following one in the cycle came through, and that was it. And we were ready, and pulled the trigger on it, and it was the right thing to do. So you have to be careful not to, go too quickly in something.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to be mindful of, there are no good dates that are there. You have to pick your spot for when the right time is.
Yeah, and then the picking in the spot, but the whole thing is instituting change. And I know that a change in organizations is difficult and sometimes it doesn't stick, but this was clearly successful. What were some of the key things that you instituted or you had in place in order to adopt or adapt change and ensuring that it maintained over time?
Right. Well, the first time, when we actually did the big reveal and people were figuring out what was happening, um, and we were talking about it, there was a lot of it's never going to work. The scope of the business was changing, and because we had the same head count of people, there was that fear that they weren't going to be able to do their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But we were supporting them with there's only so much time you can do in a day.
Yep.
And a lot of times it's interesting because a lot of times people fill their day with things that they've been doing, task oriented versus results oriented.
Mm.
And just because you're busy doesn't mean you're going to be results oriented or the goal's going to be met. It just means you're busy.
Yeah.
And so, it's classic. And I hear it even now, I don't have enough time. And then I look, okay, well, right now, if you're looking at what's happening in the world, everything stopped. And so all of this time now is like, okay, well, now you pick your spots. What's the most important of your time now?
Mm.
And if you didn't do something, I call it like ruthlessly eliminating unnecessary tasks. Well, I'm talking about something that was historic and it happened a couple of years ago. But if you bring it today and say, okay, well, what's the lesson learned? Is that if you're doing something just to do it, and there's no measurement against it, and there's no return on your either time, ROI and time,
Mm-hmm.
then if you didn't do it, what would happen? And right now it's nothing.
Yeah.
So you got a perfect time to say, these are the things that matter, these are the things we're working towards, these are the KPIs that we're looking to do and achieve. And if it doesn't fit into these goals or responsibilities, then and it doesn't happen and you don't do it, you just don't do it.
Because it doesn't fall in with the framework, right?
It doesn't fall in with the framework.
Wow.
Nice to know. I work with the class. It's this big, when people say I have no time, I'm so busy. It's not a badge of honor.
Mm.
It's just people they get excited. It's almost like a drug. It's almost like, addicted to stress and being busy.
Yeah.
You back it up now. I think some people are really learning this themselves just by example. It's like, wow, I'm at home now. I'm doing things differently. I don't
Mm.
have to do these things. And guess what? My job is getting done. I'm not saying it's all like that,
Yeah.
but I'd say over 80% of the stuff that we were doing before, if we didn't do it, it really didn't matter.
That's
Uh,
and
I'm
that's
just,
that's
I'm
like
just
you meant
saying.
ruthlessly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't shared this one, but I came into a company that um, I haven't bounced around a lot, but I've been kind of lucky to be able to fall into these examples of businesses in retail that are very different from each other. So they're not, I'm not like in the either corporate department store, and that's where I've landed,
Mm-hmm.
or in an entrepreneur. I've had a couple of uh, opportunities to be able to firsthand go after something. I came into invited by a company to take it on as a president in Southern California.
Mhm.
And this company had started at the same time as PacSun did way back like 30,
Oh.
40 years ago.
Mm.
And it wasn't PacSun, it's another company that was at the same time. And they had gone down the road of um, close to bankruptcy, and a vendor who they owed a ton of money to just took it over. So, look, I'll just take your company. And he was
Mm.
not a retailer whatsoever. He was a wholesale guru, selling to containers to the likes of Walmart and Target and all this stuff. And he had this chain of 35 stores. Like I said, he didn't know what to do with.
Wow.
And someone connected me with him. And I looked at it. He said, "Well, he said, I just, just come in and assess it. Tell me what you think. Take a
Huh.
look at it and see what we can do." And so it was a small chain, but it gave me the opportunity of the entire scope, which was good. And I got there, and Raul, I started looking at, the buying team and the stores, and he had just taken it over, like I said. And I looked at it; it hadn't had a P&L in over 3 years, and it didn't have
Wow.
any kind of reporting that you would normally do for retail. It didn't have any of the
Wow.
tools or things that normally you'd walk in and you'd say, okay, well, let me see this and let me see that. And so I realized I really had nothing. And guess what? It didn't matter, because
Really?
fundamentally we
Mm.
looked at it and we started digging in. I pulled a few lifelines, we got things out. We hired third party to help bring the numbers back together. And at the end of the day, we ended up closing most of the stores, paying off every vendor, and the profitable stores at the end, there was a choice either to take these three or four and move forward with them, or look at how we could sell those off. And the decision was made to sell them off, and we sold them to another surf industry that they're still operating them today. But that's one of those things, like, if you don't have anything to operate a business, and there was all these kinds of things that are usually at your fingertips, it
Yeah.
really, I don't want to say it's just stuff, it's not. But what matters is really getting into the product, getting into the nuts and bolts of it, building something on a solid foundation, or assessing it, and then making a decision with what you need to do, not what you are used to doing.
So I know we're not on camera, but you couldn't see my eyes get so big when you said I didn't have a P&L.
Yeah, well, I mean, and this is something, this was one of the businesses that, that experience for me as being an executive, and coming also from entrepreneurial. That's how I cut my teeth growing entrepreneurial with a company out of Canada that I started way back. And I spent 23 years there, but we started with that company
Mhm.
with 37 stores. And the the learning from that was that we were empowered like it was our business. We were, we did everything as if we took such ownership of the company, even though it wasn't our company.
Mhm.
And I had the opportunity to grow that company with the team for 23 years, from 37 stores to over 250 stores.
Oh,
We
wow.
took it public. And we also, in the mix, bought a small company during the time. People might know that out of Southern California, called Wet Seal, when they had two stores. So, and grew that into, well, what that was. It grew into a mega dynasty of in the day.
Mhm.
And that was really how I went from transition from Canada to wanting to be in the States, because for me, Irvine and Southern California was the goal.
It's tough to beat this location, that's for sure.
I know. Yeah, yeah. And it was just incredible to have that two tracks going, the Canadian track and the US track, and my counterparts at the same time,
Mhm.
growing businesses there, and having learnings, and sharing knowledge and information between Canada and US. It was a really great collaboration of great people.
No, great exposure as well. And I know as you've clearly grown businesses, you've grown um, from private to public companies, but being in an executive role, and I was touching earlier on your point of being kind of ruthless in regards to what you're focused in. And you touched on how you focused on that one store that was bankrupt and how you had to get on the actual tangibles, even though we didn't have the data and the ability to zone in on the most important aspects of the business, be it your time or be it your initiatives. I know as an executive, that's something that you've had to face with some of the bigger, some of the big brand names that you work with. Can you share some of those, if it's a leadership team, leadership tip, or if it's in specific, the way that you view the most important initiatives and then have the team work to achieving those initiatives? How do you see business the way that you see business, and how do you know what things to be working on?
Right. Well, it's, there's a few different ways to go along this. So if you talk about, let's say, from a leadership standpoint and what things that matter and getting results,
Hmm.
um, I come from a world or the way that's best served me over time in the businesses that I've been running or part of it as the chief merchant, that I started off as a buyer and I had a vision as a buyer. So I'm going like, this is really fundamental.
Hmm.
And I realized that, when I looked at things as the small scope that I had and I kept growing into larger and larger different areas, I learned that if I wanted to really be successful as a leader, that I couldn't do it by myself. And I am by no stretch of the imagination the smartest person in the room. And I love to be able to work with teams and work with people and empower them. I mean, I'm not, there's a balance. You can, there's micromanaging, which is totally not my style.
Hmm.
But there's the other of like, you're not too little hands on,
Yeah.
but just enough to give the confidence to the people that are working with you. And sometimes you have people that are just in the wrong role. They're great people, they're in the wrong role.
Mm.
And that's the decision you make. Where could they shine? Where do they work best? And what is that, what does that look like?
Yep.
But when you have people that are rocking and rolling, you never can. I'm always surprised, I should say, that because of the setup where they are open and they can think and they can do things and get to the challenges, but they know that as a leader I have their back.
Hmm.
That's when the magic really happens. And I have to tell you, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times I've been so pleasantly surprised from the least place you expect it. These little nuggets that have just totally changed the way we operate within the organization because somebody was comfortable to say, look what I found here.
Mm.
It's just, one was just a simple pivot table that just made all the difference to us in a company of the way we were starting just from an initial start off.
Wow.
It was quite something. So I can pull, I know people come to mind all the time throughout my career of what, where the little surprises or the big surprises came from. And, and I'm not saying that it's all like that, but
Hmm.
if you got the antenna to let people do their job and have a common goal, over communicate where we're going, but then let them do it, that's when the magic happens.
In being that support, and I think some key thing that you mentioned was that where can this person thrive, or where can I see them thrive in their role based on their experience and their personality and what they can contribute to the overall mission.
Yep, and keeping the focus. I look at it from a standpoint of, when I start back way back when I started my vision of what this could be
Hmm.
and how to strategize in different retail organizations. I mean, I don't bring what I do from one company to the other and just
Yeah.
here's like, here's the cookie cutter thing. This is what I do and this is how I do it. You go in and you look at it and you say, okay, in one sense, I worked with a team in the middle, really in the middle of Canada,
Hmm.
and there was, the talent was the talent. They were all really great people, very caring, but they were a bit in the deer in the headlights because that company had been losing money for years,
Wow.
and it wasn't because they weren't trying. They just didn't have, they didn't step back and say, okay, well, what's the process? What makes sense? What's the timing? Why are we doing this? And so we looked at it and, and I couldn't say, okay, I'll call New York, I'll call Toronto, I'll call, the world and bring in new talent. A lot of
Mhm.
times you can do that. But this was it. No one was moving to this city. No one was coming over there, and they were scratching their heads why I was there. But yeah, I saw the opportunity of the company on solid foundation,
Mhm.
and they had money, so it wasn't like, for me, there's a criteria. If you can't pay your bills and it's a Hail Mary and there's no hope to be able to keep the cash flow going, well, then that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But if there's cash flow and there's something there and you've got people that are willing, and you just look at it and say, okay, well, what's going to make sense here? And coming into the organization, and I put my heart on my sleeve and said, hey, this is what I'm seeing, but you guys have been here in the trenches for years, and I don't want us all running off like, off the cliff together. I'm looking for you to say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, or let's go and try.
Mhm.
And we turned that company around with the same team
Wow.
within 18 months, and that company
Wow.
still exists today. And that was a real feather for the people who were consistently, they followed, and they were empowered to make the right choices based on the customer, clearly the customer and the culture.
That's how you win too. I'm
Yeah.
just taking notes on that, Donna. That's incredible. 18 months. And then also, like you mentioned earlier, focusing, having the team buy-in, right? It's not just saying this is what you're going to do and you're going to do it because I told you. It's more like, okay, let's work together. Challenge me on these questions, challenge me in this direction because I want all insights so that we can make the best possible decision to win.
Correct, 100%. And so when I was hired for this, and this was a company that, I had not left. I had stayed with the company in Montreal for 20 something years, and this was a big leap of faith for me to change and move. We had a how do I say, a life changing tragedy, and decided to, see what was out there in the world,
Hmm.
and landed up in this company. And I didn't get to see the numbers. It was private, so it's not like you can look at, okay, you're going to a public company, you can see what you're dealing with. But this
Yeah.
was a private company, and I was put through the paces by the executive team there, the owners and the CEO, saying, we're taking a we're, we think you're the right person.
Hmm.
We don't want you to bring your company. We don't want you to make our company what your company was for 23 years. And I respected that. I said, if I wanted to do that, I would have stayed where I was. you know, I really was curious, because you do what you do and you move up the ranks, and I had a really great ride. uh, I was empowered to be able to do, I mean, we went to Europe 4 times, we went to the Orient, we were shopping, samples were never a problem, we had a lot of fun. We worked hard, but we had a really good, tight industry collaboration, because it's
Hmm.
tough, but people want to work with people that they like.
Exactly.
And so if you have a choice to give somebody, a price break for a product with somebody that you like working with versus somebody that's like really just nickeling, diming you to death, who are you going to, that was what I was trained, and we had fun. But when I didn't know if I could do it anywhere else. And so to take that leap after 23 years, change a city, bring kids to a new city and a new job, the last thing I wanted to do was do the same thing as where I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I looked at what the model was. I looked at what their focus was. It was a
Hmm.
solid foundation. However, it had been losing money for years, and the company just kept. They had unlimited funds, and they believed that the people were important, so they just kept funding it. And I sat for the first board meeting and looked at this seriously sea of red, and I'm going, "Are you kidding me?"
Oh my
And
God.
I took it personally. It was my first board meeting, but I had nothing to do with those numbers. I just came in. And I said, I looked to myself, and I was shaking my head, and I'm going like, we are not going to look at this red ever again. and because there was no reason for it.
Yeah.
And so in 18 months, we just repositioned, refocused, and put the lens through that any product that was coming into those doors, if it didn't fit our customer and our clientele, it wasn't coming through the door. And that lens was very easy for the team because it wasn't personal anymore about what they liked and didn't like. It was about what would our customer like? Would this go in her, would she be wearing this in her wardrobe? And that made an easy transition. And then we started really looking at how to not just look at the product, but the sizing, and that we didn't want to have ever having a customer come in and not find the size that she wanted. That was another, big turnaround too.
The small
Same
subtleties that you
same
have to look
team,
into,
same
right?
team, Raul.
Same
It's the
team.
same team. Yep.
You reshift and focus, or reshift and frame, and how they make the decisions.
Yeah, and it was, I don't want to, say and simplify it too much or make like it light of it, but
No, it's not
most of
light at
this
all.
stuff
Yeah.
is common sense.
No, but when you're
Why are
dealing
we?
with this multiplied by how large the organization is, multiplied by how many customers you've had, it can get kind of tricky in regards to what is the right direction, what is the right way of doing things, right?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times too, there are certain things that people, when you think about the retail world right now, whether it's wholesale or retail or bricks and mortar, e-commerce, any platform you're looking at, the hardest thing for the buyers or the design team, design is there to design, so I'm not saying so much on that side, but
Hmm.
really to pick a spot and say, this is, I believe in this because, and you edit and make a choice through, you're the expert as the buyer or the person who's responsible for buying the items,
Hmm.
that they make a choice that stands behind what it is, and the clients, the customers are going to resonate with that with their purchases.
Yep.
The hardest thing is for them to go like, ooh, I'm going to make a decision because I'd rather have more assortment and more this and more that,
Yeah.
because just in case I'm going to catch somebody who's going to come through that door, I'm going to have that just in case.
Availability. What's the what? Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't work. You have to have a variety for sure, but you also have to be like, this is what we've got the best and this is what it is, and have that edited assortment where the customer comes through and says, oh, I get it. It's really hard to make that, because when you look at what the number behind each item is that they need to buy, if they look at it from a real logical standpoint of
Hmm.
of not being out of stock before it even starts,
Hmm.
it's a scary number, and people are like, "Woo!" I don't. She's like, "Really? Is that the number?" Yeah, you
Yeah.
count it out. That's the number. Why does it happen that 80% of the time you have all this assortment and 20% of it is really generating your sales?
Yeah.
You can fluff it around. I talk about, just simple things like, here's your plate, here's your dinner plate, here's your meat, and you want to put some parsley around on the side, but you just can't serve parsley.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, with everything going on, with everything that you've helped businesses from the startups to private to public companies, you mentioned a lot about getting and staying ahead of the curve. So where is the curve or the status quo right now, and how do you help, or how do we get ahead of it? Like, what are some of the things that we need to be looking out for?
Okay, well, so right now, here's a perfect example. I mean, who knew that this was going to happen? Um, Everything shut down. And I come back to the fight, flight, or freeze.
Hmm.
And, I respect people who say, this is it. I'm just leaving. It's done. I'm over it. And others who, are frozen and just saying, like, I'm going to just wait until this is all over.
Hmm.
I'm just going to see what happens, and then I'm going to go out. Those two emotions are emotions that something's happening to you. You're not in control of it. And so it's not a good place to be. I find myself, sometimes I'm like, okay, do I then, and you let that go, but then you come back and feel like, I'd rather fight and look at what, if you're specific retail today, or even any business today, but if you come back to the retail specific, is okay, even if I don't know what's going to be out there, what the new reality is, what can I do now? What
Hmm.
can I think about to keep ahead, like the head of the curve, by being ahead with my customers?
Mm.
And what if, and getting into, those kinds of scenarios where there's multitude. We talked about a few of them earlier, but how
Hmm.
do you, curbside pickup and special this, and make sure that, we'll be ready for you when we're open, at whatever that time is. What do you need now? What's going through? Even if it's just like to connect,
Hmm.
but that feeling of fighting and is a better feeling emotionally. I don't know, you tell me, versus, just kind of waiting under a rock. Because if
Yeah.
you wait under a rock and you say, okay, it's all done now, we're going to open up, where you're so far behind because other people are just thinking about what it is, what could be next. And that, customer, let's say market share, you're there in front, you're a furniture store and everybody's closed, but you're still talking to them and doing different things that are helping.
Mhm.
Guess what? There's no home offices now. There are things going
Yeah.
on that, if you wait till you're open, people already got half their stuff already in the house. Same with leisure wear. So you can talk about a lot of different things, but I just
Hmm.
picked those two things specifically. Home offices now are the big deal.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I think I mean, what at this part of it, I definitely want to get a little bit more like some of the examples of any. You don't have to say client names, but I can ask you like, can you give me any examples of like, for example, the call you had, I think on Friday, right? Some of the questions that were being asked there, or
Y-
uh,
Yeah. Well, I mean, one client, one retailer, she had never gone e-commerce,
mhm,
and started to, go through social media and then bring up a website through, hiring somebody, even when you're talking about how you repurpose the employees and the staff.
mhm,
You could be in retail and you have X amount of people that are on the floor. The number of people and what they're doing could be repurposed into different things. People who do social media, people are going to be bringing business in a different way, right? There's multi channels now, and this, out of nowhere, who knew she was going to go into retail, into e-commerce, down the line, pushing it out, pushing it out, pushing it. Now all of a sudden, she had her best week ever in
really?
e-commerce. Had no idea, did some crazy number that she had no idea that was, and the stores were closed, and it was all specifically through her e-commerce, her new e-commerce launch. Surprise. The other thing is that when you're looking at um, people, and how I help people in business, and specifically retail, when you're looking at all of the things that have to be up there. I mean, it's never ending of the things, of all of the things that you're looking at. And I challenge people to get a whiteboard and have everything up there so they can really see it, how scary it is, of
Mhm.
all the stuff that has to happen. But I help them with what actually needs to happen and when. So
The key
it's
focuses, yeah,
yeah. And so I don't, uh, not to get, I mean, I have a sense of humor. I like to laugh. I like to work with you.
yeah,
I like to work hard. I like to play, and I like to enjoy what I do.
yep,
Um, I'm not a surgeon. I'm a retailer. and, and so when I look at, how to keep that focus on it, it's the, yeah, but I need to do this one. And yes, I need to do that one. And I come back and say, okay, well, what do we really need to do now? And what is going to be your biggest return on your time and your money
mm,
now? And let's focus on those three things now. And let's look at other things as they go and they evolve over time when they need to happen. So
exactly,
you have a set, and I keep coming back to this, what's the strategy of what you want? What's that goal going to look like? And then what does that structure need to be, whether it's today or whether you're building it over time? Help create a playbook where you have all of these things ready, and you evolve it and you move it as it goes. And if you cannot measure it, and if you do not measure it, it's not real. And I've worked with people just recently, startup, and it's been 2 weeks now, not a daily, but 2 weeks, once a week, of all of the things, all of the balls that are up in the air. And so I help her focus down to, okay, what matters now? We've talked about this for 2 weeks. Let's get this down. Let's get this, what matters. It's your business. What do you want it to look like? And
Hmm.
let's put these things into specifics. And so in her scenario, she had a business where it changed. COVID came, it changed.
Hmm.
She had a business where she was going to cycling events. And
Hmm.
cycling events, all of a sudden, she wanted to pivot. She wanted to say, how can I scale my business from cycling events to something else?
Hmm.
And so, and so now, be careful what you ask for,
Yeah.
because those cycling events are over.
Yeah.
She also owns a lot of product, and her product is in it's made for women. It's women specific athletic wear.
Hmm.
And so we start formulating the strategy. I'd like to have retail. And it's interesting because not a lot of people want to go into retail bricks and mortar. However, the new retail bricks and mortar could look very, very different from what it was before, even
Exactly.
3 months ago.
Yeah.
And so how do you formulate this? And so where's the revenue stream going to come from? So it ended up being 4 channels. And the first channel is her social media e-commerce, where it's up and running, it's working, and
Hmm.
she's got, now we're looking at KPIs and metrics that go against that.
Hmm.
Then she's got wholesale, and wholesale, looking at it, not to give too much out on it, but wholesale I look at, well, first of all, let me back up. As a retailer, for me, vertical, and that's why I get excited about direct to consumer, I get excited about e-commerce, I get excited about wholesale and retail bricks and mortar, because
Hmm.
if you can be in charge of your own destiny that way from product development standpoint,
Yeah.
then you're not at the mercy of another retailer putting your product in, and hopefully you get it positioned in the right place.
Yeah.
So that's another topic we can talk about too. But being vertical in this sense with this example is really a beautiful way for her to be able to start moving forward. Um, Once I also said there's product ownership. So you think, this is the brick and mortar, what is going to look like. You can negotiate what, everything is a variable expense now. So you can negotiate what that looks like. Make sure that you cover your expenses there. What are your KPIs? What's your goal metrics to actually break even?
Hmm.
Take that and look at that venue. And oh, by the way, you can also look at that as a home office, or you can look at it as where your wholesale people can come and actually see what it's like. A lot
Yeah.
of e-commerce people are looking at opening bricks and mortar now, so that people can touch and feel. They're
Exactly.
at a bit of an disadvantage because they haven't got the experience of what it's like to really be. I shouldn't say that. I'm putting people in a box for that, but people who have had bricks and mortar stores for years know what it's like, because you're touching, you're feeling, and you're interacting with customers.
Yep.
E-commerce is much more, it's a transactional thing. So if the channels for her were retail, um, e-commerce, wholesale. And wholesale, look at wholesale, if you have wholesale accounts that way, it could be looking at it also as a marketing opportunity. And so what does this look like as a package? And oh, by the way, the races might come back again. And so
Yeah.
here's another channel. So have it documented in a way that makes sense. Have KPIs around that and what the expectations are.
Hmm.
Look at what the break even number is, and then put all of these buckets together and see how it's going to evolve over time. One might be better than the other,
Yep.
or they might all track, but you're tracking them separately, as opposed to like one kind of bubble.
I love everything that you mentioned there. So
so,
having
uh,
one centralized playbook, this is what we're going to be doing per channel. Measuring the performance, and the way you put it was perfect. If it's not measured, it doesn't exist. And
for
measuring
sure.
performance and then making strategic decisions based off the history as well as where the future is heading towards.
Yeah, and you don't know what it's going to be, right?
Yeah.
You have a number, you don't, but entrepreneurs specifically, and I'm one of them too. That's part of why I probably didn't work in the corporate uh, department store environment for 20 something years. I really like the idea of entrepreneurial. There's no limit to how high is high.
Hmm.
You have to also be careful though, because I like to think about calculated risks and looking at what calculated risks are
Yeah.
and make sure that you measure it that way too. You know, um, it's an interesting concept, but working with in this one scenario, when I started, it wasn't kind of like they say in French, évident. It wasn't like, oh, I see it right away.
Oh.
But in listening and working and talking and
Hmm.
listening to what that goal was,
Hmm.
because you're working with people, it's their businesses, it's their goals. I can skin a cat many different ways and look at stuff and say, oh, you should be doing this and you should be doing that.
Yep.
I'd rather hear what your goals are and see where you want to go, because it could be totally different from what I'm thinking.
Yep.
And then helping with that strategy, what does that look like and how does that evolve over time? That makes sense. And that is end to end and not just one slice of something, because there's always
Exactly.
cause and effect with what you do. And sometimes, in large companies specifically, um, in that there's a silo that's looking at one aspect of the business,
Hmm.
and there's multiple savings and value and all this kind of stuff. But then you look down the line and it's affecting all the way down negatively.
Yeah.
So, that's another whole
Another
topic.
big piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh
Donna, I
gosh,
think there's so many different things. We might have to do a second one, but there's so
I
many
was
different
in
things we can dive into.
I
Um,
because I it's not that I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a textbook and saying, I think this is what it's like, actually real life scenarios of learning in some cases what not to do, but in some cases, if that's what you do, be ready for what the reality could be or the effect could be.
the outcomes can be. Yeah, no, and this
Hmm.
was all essentially going over your experience, your history. This is all from your experience, and I love every bit of it. Well, so Don, I know what's the best way for listeners to connect with you if anyone wants to reach out or have any questions for you?
Well, I have my website and I have my LinkedIn. I'm hopeful that you're going to put that on as a contact part.
Yep.
I'm easy to reach out to via text, email, and I'm always open to have a conversation. We can pick some times and things and see. I'm not one that comes through with my way or the highway. I love having conversations with people because there's always stuff to learn and build on, and best practice. I don't like to say best practices, but I'm not one that wants to reinvent the wheel. And there's a lot of good things out there for business owners and leaders
Hmm.
who haven't had an opportunity to have someone who will be totally confidential and listening to understand and help them reach their goals.
Who's
And if I
actually
don't
been
know the
there?
answer, I'm
Yeah.
certainly going to point them in the right direction to somebody who does.
Oh, I love that. I'll have Donna's LinkedIn in the show notes so people will be able to reach out to you there.
Yeah, from either coaching, consulting, mentoring, from the retail side of it, retail is my DNA. There's no question that's my passion, especially right now. But there's such an opportunity for retail too. I do come from the cup half full, and I'm always optimistic in that sense. But I'm also a realist,
Hmm.
and I'm happy to listen and help coach through what the different opportunities could be, even if it's just to have somebody poke holes in what their theory thinking is.
Hmm.
Before they go to a bank or before they go to somebody or before that kind
That
of
is
thing,
very valuable.
it's a safe space.
Awesome. Well, Donna, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Raul. I enjoyed the conversation.